On the afternoon of March 18, 1925, the sky over the American Midwest looked wrong. Farmers paused in their fields, looking up. Shopkeepers stepped out onto the street. Chickens fell silent. The air felt heavy, charged, as if the world itself was holding its breath. There were no sirens to warn them of what was coming. No radio alerts crackled with urgency. And in just a few hours, nearly 700 people would be dead killed by a single, relentless force of nature that would carve its name into history as the deadliest tornado the United States has ever known. It began quietly in southeastern Missouri. Around 1 in the afternoon, a low, ominous cloud dropped from the sky near the town of Ellington. Witnesses didn't even describe it as a tornado at first. It looked more like a rolling fog, a boiling black mass dragging itself across the countryside. There was no dramatic funnel twisting from the clouds, no classic rope shape. This was something worse and massive. Rain-wrapped monster that hit its full form until it was already too late. The tornado moved fast, terrifyingly fast. Modern estimates suggest it raced forward at speeds up to 70 miles per hour, faster than most people could run, and even faster than many cars of that era. Entire towns had only seconds of warning, if they had any at all. Families eating lunch suddenly found their walls collapsing around them. Schools full of children vanished in a roar of wind and splintering wood. In Annapolis, Missouri, the tornado struck with surgical cruelty. Homes disintegrated. The local school was obliterated, killing students and teachers. Survivors later spoke of straw driven through tree trunks, of boards embedded deep into the ground like spears. One man claimed the wind lifted him, carried him dozens of yards, and dropped him into a field alive, but surrounded by the dead. As the tornado crossed into Illinois, it grew even more lethal. By now, it had been on the ground for over an hour, an almost unheard of lifespan for a tornado. It showed no signs of weakening. In fact, it seemed to gain strength, widening to nearly a mile across in places. The town of Gorham was almost completely erased from the map, but it was Murfreesboro, Illinois, that would suffer the worst single-town death toll in American history. Murfreesboro was a thriving railroad town, busy and loud, full of life on that March afternoon. Within minutes, it became a graveyard. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. A school collapsed, killing dozens of children. The tornado ripped the roof off the Longfellow School and then crushed the walls inward. Parents would later dig through the rubble with their bare hands, desperately hoping to find anyone, alive. When it was over, Murfreesboro alone counted nearly 250 dead. Bodies were found miles away. Some were never identified. The town smelled of splintered pine, leaking gas, and death. Survivors wandered the streets in shock, calling out names that would never be answered. And still, the tornado was not finished. It barreled northeast, crossing the Wabash River into Indiana. By this point, it had already traveled over 150 miles, something meteorologists at the time believed was impossible for a single tornado. Many experts argued it must have been a series of separate tornadoes, but survivor accounts and the continuous trail of destruction told a different story. This was one continuous beast, refusing to live from the ground. In Indiana, towns like Griffin and Princeton were devastated. Factories collapsed on workers. Trains were tossed from their tracks. In one incredible case, a heavy iron railroad bridge was twisted and shifted off its foundation, something that defied all engineering logic. Farmers later found pieces of Indiana debris scattered back in Illinois, carried dozens of miles against the storm's path by its powerful circulation. By the time the tornado finally dissipated near Petersburg, Indiana, after more than 3 hours on the ground, it had carved a path of destruction approximately 219 miles long, the longest tornado track ever recorded. Nearly 700 people were dead. Over 2,000 were injured. Thousands upon thousands were left homeless. The scale of the tragedy was almost incomprehensible. One of the most chilling aspects of the tri-state tornado is how little warning anyone had. In 1925, the U.S. Weather Bureau deliberately avoided using the word tornado in its forecasts. Officials feared the word itself would cause mass panic. As a result, vague warnings like severe storms possible were the best people got if they got anything at all. Many communities didn't even have access to radios. There were no community storm shelters, no emergency management agencies, no coordinated disaster response. In the immediate aftermath, it was neighbors who rescued neighbors. Doctors performed surgery by lantern light in makeshift clinics. Churches and schools that were still standing became makeshift morgues. The Red Cross arrived days later to scenes that they described as resembling a war zone. But amid the devastation, stories of survival bordered on the miraculous. A baby was found alive and unharmed beneath a pile of rubble after being carried hundreds of feet by the storm. A family of 5 was swept from their home for died. But one child survived by clinging desperately to a fence post. A man in Illinois was impaled by a wooden beam and lived, later saying he felt no pain until hours after the event, a grim testament to the power of shock. Equally haunting were the stories of those who sensed something was wrong, but didn't understand what it was. Many survivors recalled an eerie, unnatural silence just before the impact. Others described the sky turning a sickly shade of green, or the air growing hot and suffocating. Animals seemed to know. Chickens refused to move. Horses broke free from their fences and ran wildly in the moments before the storm hit. Today, meteorologists still study the tri-state tornado, and it continues to challenge what we think we know about tornado behavior. Its extreme speed, its incredible longevity, and its massive, continuous path make it an outlier even among the most violent EF5 storms. Some experts believe it may have been a rare phenomenon known as a tornado family, a series of tornadoes so tightly connected that it appeared to be a single, continuous event. Others argue that it truly was one singular, unprecedented storm, a perfect and horrifying alignment of atmospheric conditions. What's certain is that this storm changed the future of weather forecasting forever. In the decades that followed, the Weather Bureau slowly reversed its stance on using the word tornado. Official warnings became standard practice. Radar technology was developed and improved. Siren systems were installed in towns across the country. Storm shelters became more common. Every modern tornado warning, every alert that saves a life today, owes something to the immense tragedy and the lives lost on that March day in 1925. And yet, for all its historic significance, the tri-state tornado has largely faded from public memory. There is no single iconic photograph of the funnel, no dramatic newsreel footage to capture its horror. It happened too fast, too early in the age of media, and across a wide area. Its victims were scattered across 3 states, hundreds of small towns, and thousands of forgotten family stories. But if you listen closely, the echoes of that day are still there in the rebuilt towns of southern Illinois, in the quiet fields of Missouri, and in the river valleys of Indiana. The land remembers, and so should we. Because for 3.5 hours in 1925, the wind itself seemed to turn against humanity, and it has never, ever been so deadly since. Thank you for watching. If you found this story important, please consider liking and subscribing for more historical deep dives. See you next time.